6 different civilizations, unaware of one another, separated by thousands of kilometers, having almost never met, told nearly the same story. Not word for word. The names are different, the gods are different, the geographies are different, but the skeleton is always the same. The sky opened, the waters rose, one man built a boat, he gathered animals 2 by 2, and humanity started over. If this story had been told once, we would have called it a nice legend and moved on. If it had been told twice, we might have said maybe they heard it from each other. But 6 times? 10 times? 20 times? When communities separated by oceans, deserts, and mountains, completely unaware of each other, tell the same story, is there anything left to say? Maybe there is. Maybe the answer everyone is looking for is hidden in the question itself. Why couldn't humanity forget this story? Tonight, we're going after that story. But a warning, this journey will take you much farther than you expect. From the muddy plains of Mesopotamia to the Rocky Mountains of Greece, from the rivers of the Indian subcontinent to the sunken streets of Atlantis, to a ship rising in the middle of the desert. And in the end, perhaps, we'll understand why humanity has kept telling this story for thousands of years. To begin, we need to go to a very old place, to the south of present-day Iraq, to the low, humid lands between the Tigris and the Euphrates. Today, most of it is empty desert, but approximately 5,000 years ago, something existed here that the world had never seen before. The people who lived on these lands invented writing. Such a simple sentence, but the meaning is enormous. They pressed their thoughts into clay, fired it, and left it for future generations. They organized numbers in a base 60 system, which is why we still divide the hour into 60 minutes and the minute into 60 seconds to this day. They looked at the stars and recorded their movements. The first astronomical tables were born here. They wrote legal codes, humanity's first written laws, and they built temples, massive stepped towers reaching toward the sky, ziggurats, as if they were trying to build a stairway from earth to heaven. And these same people also created the oldest known great narrative in human history. This narrative was about a king who feared death. He was the most powerful man in the world. He had raised the walls of his city. He was undefeated in battle, stronger than everyone. But one day his close friend died, and in that moment the king understood that power was no cure for death. He was so afraid that he set out on a journey to the end of the world to find the secret of immortality. He crossed deserts, he climbed mountains, he walked through dark tunnels, he crossed the waters of death, and there, at the end of the world, in a place no one knew, he met a very old man. This old man was immortal because he was the one who had survived the flood, and the gods had given him immortality as a reward. The king was stunned. The man standing before him had neither the look of a hero nor the stance of a warrior. He was ordinary, quiet, calm, humble, and he was immortal. Power had not brought immortality, obedience had. The old man told the king his story, every word heavy, every sentence 1,000 years old. In some traditions, his name was Ziusudra. In other accounts, he was called Utnapishtim. One of the gods had secretly delivered him a message. A great destruction was coming. The waters would rise. Everything would be wiped away. Build a ship, the god had said, a great ship, and take aboard every living thing. The man built the ship. His neighbors mocked him. Who builds a ship on dry land? With each passing day, the ridicule grew, but the man didn't hear, or heard and didn't care. He worked like a man possessed. Days, weeks, perhaps months, a massive ship rose on the plain with no sea around it, no water, not even a cloud, just flat earth and sun. And in the middle of it, a ship of incomprehensible size. He took his family aboard the ship. He carried pairs of animals. It is said he also took craftsmen, because after the flood, the knowledge to rebuild the world would be needed. And the waters came. The sky opened its gates. The clouds collapsed. The horizon line disappeared. Where the sea ended and where the sky began, no one could tell. Rain from above, springs from below. The waters came from two directions at once. The earth cracked, the sky split open. The underground springs burst forth. For 7 days and 7 nights rain fell without ceasing. The wind blew so fiercely that sky and sea merged into one. Which way was up and which was down, no one could tell. All the plains, all the cities, even those temples reaching toward heaven were submerged. According to the accounts, the gods themselves were terrified by the magnitude of the destruction. They regretted it, but it was too late. When the waters receded, the man came out of his ship. He sent a dove. It returned, having found no dry land. He sent a swallow. It returned too. Then he sent a raven. The raven did not return. It had found dry land. The earth was ready to begin again. The man descended from the ship and made an offering. The gods caught the scent of the offering and, in the words of the ancient texts, swarmed like flies. The destruction had left even them exhausted. This story was carved into clay tablets approximately 4,000 years ago inside one of humanity's oldest works of written literature. And when the old man finished his story, the king asked him, "Will you give me immortality too?" The old man said, "First, a test. Stay awake for 6 days and 6 nights without sleeping." The king sat down, but he was tired. His eyes closed. He fell asleep. When he woke, he had missed his chance. The old man gave the king one last chance, a plant at the bottom of the sea. The king dove down, found it, pulled it out, but on the journey back, while bathing at a spring, a serpent came and stole the plant. The serpent shed its skin and was renewed, but the king returned empty-handed. He had lost immortality. This final scene is worth pausing on. Immortality was not given to man, but knowledge was. The king went home and told the story. He had it written on a clay tablet, and we, 4,000 years later, are still reading it. Perhaps that was the real immortality, the story itself. Immortality was not in the body, it was in the word, in memory, in narrative. And when the king understood this, he looked at his walls, those massive ramparts, those enormous stones, and for the first time he saw the walls too were part of a story. The walls too would one day crumble, but their story remained. It has been told for 4,000 years. Keep every detail of this account in mind, the ship, the animals, the birds, the mountain, the offering, because all of them will reappear thousands of kilometers away, centuries later, again and again. Now let us travel west from Mesopotamia, to the other side of the Mediterranean, to a mountainous, rocky peninsula covered with olive trees. This is ancient Greece. But before we get to the flood, we need to know the story that comes just before it in the Greek tradition, because these two stories are linked, and the connection itself may be more interesting than the flood itself. In Greek accounts, there is a figure, Prometheus, humanity's greatest benefactor, or, according to some, its greatest criminal. Prometheus stole the fire of the gods and gave it to humans. Fire here is not just flame. Fire is knowledge. It is technology. It is civilization itself. With fire, humans began to think, to create, to build their own world. But how had this happened? According to another account, Epimetheus had been given a task to distribute abilities to all creatures. Epimetheus got to work. He gave speed to one, wings to another, strength to another, armor to another, claws to another. But when he reached the end, he realized nothing was left for humans. Humans were naked, defenseless. They had no claws, no wings, no armor. Prometheus could not bear this. He entered the workshop of the gods, stole fire and craft, and gave them to humans. Humans could now think, create, protect themselves. But something was missing. Humans could not come together. They could not build cities. They were killing each other. At this, the king of the gods distributed two things equally to everyone, a sense of justice and a sense of shame. And he declared, "Let death be given to anyone who does not share in these two."
Pause on this detail for a moment. Justice and shame were given equally to everyone, not to a chosen group. Everyone started with the same moral equipment. This is a profoundly important idea, because to understand the cause of the flood, you need to remember this point. If everyone started with the same equipment, then corruption came not from without, but from within. No one could say, "I didn't know." The tools had been given, they simply weren't used.
The gods punished Prometheus. He was chained to the rocks. Every day an eagle came and ate his liver. The liver regenerated overnight, and in the morning the same torture began again, an agony meant to last forever. But Prometheus felt no regret. He was in pain, but he suffered in full awareness that he had given fire to humanity. This figure is perhaps the first tragic hero in the history of literature. He did what he knew was right and paid the price. And the gods sent humanity one more gift, a woman made of clay, the first woman. Her name was Pandora. She brought a box with her. When she opened the box, all evils burst forth: disease, hunger, lies, pain, death. Everything spread across the world, and at the bottom of the box, one thing remained: hope. Keep this sequence in mind. Pandora's box and the flood are links in the same chain. First, a perfect beginning, then the transfer of knowledge, then corruption, then destruction, and at the bottom of destruction, always, every time, hope. The hope left at the bottom of the box, the seed left inside the ship, the person left on the mountaintop, they are all the same thing. Destruction does not take everything, something remains, and that remaining thing becomes the foundation of the new world. The Greeks also spoke of a golden age. In the beginning, under the rule of Kronos, there was no war, no disease, not even death. Humans lived in peace. The earth bore fruit on its own. But then the Golden Age ended. The Silver Age came, then the Bronze Age, then the Iron Age. With each age, the world grew a little more corrupted, a little harsher, a little darker. Just like the Garden of Paradise in other cultures, everywhere there is a memory of once upon a time everything was good. And Prometheus had a son. His name was Deucalion, and Deucalion became the hero of a flood. Zeus, king of the gods, had looked upon humanity and did not like what he saw. Humans had abandoned respect for the gods. They were warring with each other. Morality had collapsed. Remember, justice and shame had been given equally to everyone, but humans had stopped using these tools. Zeus decided the earth needed to be cleansed. The waters rose. Everything was submerged. But Deucalion had been warned, according to some accounts, by his father Prometheus. He built a chest, boarded it with his wife Pyrrha, and drifted on the water for 9 days and 9 nights. When the waters receded, they came aground on the peak of Mount Parnassus. They looked around. Everywhere was mud, silence, and nothingness. No other humans remained in the world. And they received a prophecy: throw the bones of the Great Mother behind you. The Great Mother was Mother Earth, and her bones were stones. They threw stones behind them. Those thrown by Deucalion became men. Those thrown by Pyrrha became women. Humanity quite literally was reborn from stone. When the waters receded, there was neither house nor field nor animal between them. Silence, a vast, suffocating silence. In a world where thousands of people had lived just yesterday, now there were 2 people and an endless sea of mud. But the stones turned into humans, and those 2 people started humanity over again. And this account even has a date recorded in historical chronologies, 1500 years before the Common Era, Deucalion's flood, registered not as a legend, but as a date. Wait a moment, did you notice? The same structure is here too, a divine warning, a ship or chest, waters, a mountain, a new beginning. In Mesopotamia, humans were made from clay. Here, too, from earth, from stone,
a new beginning. Thousands of kilometers apart, different language, different gods, different geography, but the same skeleton.
Now let us turn east, much farther east, beyond the Himalayas to the Indian subcontinent. In the Indian tradition, time works very differently from how the West understands it. In the West, time is a line, a beginning, an end. But in the Indian tradition, time is a wheel. It turns. It operates in immense cycles. Each of these cycles, called a kalpa, lasts billions of years. And at the end of each cycle, the universe dissolves, disintegrates, and is created anew. This destruction is not seen as a catastrophe here. It is the nature of the universe, like breathing. The universe inhales, expands, exhales, collapses, and inhales again. In the Indian tradition, three great forces govern the rhythm of the universe: the creator, the preserver, and the destroyer. But the destroyer does not merely destroy. Destruction is simultaneously transformation, the beginning of renewal. Without destruction, there is no renewal. Without death, there is no birth. Within one of these immense cycles, there is a flood story. The ancient texts relate it this way. There was a wise man named Manu. One day, while Manu was washing his hands, a tiny fish fell into his palms. The fish begged him, "Protect me, and I will protect you." Manu placed the fish in a bowl. The fish grew. He moved it to a larger vessel. The fish grew again. He released it into a pond. The fish grew even larger. He moved it to a river. The fish outgrew the river. He released it into the ocean. And finally, the fish grew as vast as the ocean itself. Then the fish turned to Manu and said, "A great flood is coming. Build a ship. Take aboard the seed of every plant, the essence of every living thing, and be ready." Manu built the ship. He prepared ropes, and when the waters came, that immense fish swam before the ship. Manu tied a rope to the fish's horn. Yes, this fish had horns, and the fish pulled the ship. Through the waves, through the storm, across waters that seemed infinite, and it pulled the ship to the peak of a mountain. "Tie your ship to this mountain," said the fish, "and as the waters slowly recede, slowly descend." Manu did so. The waters receded. When he looked around, he was alone, the only human being in the world, and he started humanity over again. That fish, in some traditions, was the preserving form of the creative force. In humanity's darkest moment, it had come in the smallest, most defenseless, most inconspicuous form as a fish that fit in the palm of a hand. And that tiny thing saved humanity. But behind this story lies a much larger philosophy. In the Indian tradition, the lifespan of the universe has been calculated, and the calculation is staggeringly vast. One kalpa, a single daytime of the universe, lasts approximately 4,320,000,000 years. Then a night comes, the same duration. During the day, the universe lives, moves, beings are born and die. During the night, the universe sleeps. Everything dissolves, sinks into silence. And when morning comes, everything begins again. Within each of these immense cycles, there are smaller cycles as well. 4 ages, Satya, Treta, Dwapara, Kali, follow one another. In the first age, virtue is complete. Humans live rightly. In the second, virtue diminishes slightly. In the third, it falls by half. In the fourth, which according to some traditions is the age we now live in, virtue drops to a quarter. Lies increase, greed grows, wars multiply. Look carefully at this structure. It is almost identical to the Greek decline from the Golden Age to the Iron Age. 2 traditions thousands of kilometers apart, with no contact whatsoever, saw the same downward spiral. And what happens at the end of each great cycle? Destruction, sometimes by water, sometimes by fire, sometimes by wind, then silence, then recreation. Manu's flood is the story of one of these countless cycles. To the Indian tradition, the flood was not a surprise. It was not even considered a disaster. It was the exhalation of the universe. And after the exhalation, inevitably, a new inhalation would come. This perspective carries a chilling kind of comfort. Everything will perish, but everything will come again. You need not be afraid, but be prepared. Looking back now, we have 3 stories: Mesopotamia, Greece, India, 3 different continents, 3 different language families, 3 different belief systems. But they are telling the same thing, not word for word, but the skeleton is the same. Warning, ship, water, mountain, new beginning. Why is this so important? Because this pattern does not end here. It goes much further. And the place we're coming to now, the question of why the waters rose, is perhaps the darkest corner of this entire story. There is one more thing all these stories have in common, and this may be the most unsettling one of all. Why did the waters rise? Asking this question is easy. Answering it is hard, because every culture gives a different reason, but beneath all of them lies the same fear. In Mesopotamian accounts, the gods had grown weary of humans. Humans were making too much noise. Yes, truly, in some ancient texts, that is the reason given. The gods could not sleep. They decided to wipe out humanity. But one of the gods, the god of wisdom, did not agree with the decision and secretly warned one human. What's striking is this: even among the gods there was no consensus. The destruction was not decided unanimously. One of them said no, and that single no saved humanity. In the Greek account, the reason was different: moral collapse. Humans had abandoned respect for the gods. They were killing each other. The line between right and wrong had been erased. Remember, justice and shame had been given equally to everyone, but humans had stopped using these gifts. Zeus decided to cleanse. But the truly interesting part comes now. In a very ancient Jewish tradition, in texts outside the official canon, but circulated hand to hand for centuries, read, debated, the cause of the flood was tied to an entirely different story. And this story may be the darkest of all flood narratives. According to this account, when humanity was still very young, celestial beings descended to earth, 200 of them. They gathered on the peak of a mountain and swore an oath among themselves. This oath is remarkable because they knew they were about to do something they should not do, and they knew they would pay the price, but they decided anyway. They swore together that none of them would turn back. Then they united with human women. But that was not all. One of these beings, in some traditions his name is given as Azazel, taught humans forbidden knowledge. He taught weapon making, swords, shields, armor, the art of war. Humans learned to kill each other more efficiently. He taught cosmetics, paint, adornment, decoration, altering appearances, deception, false beauty. He taught astrology, reading the heavens, predicting the future. He taught sorcery, bending and twisting the laws of nature. He taught knowledge of plants, not for medicine, but for poison. Each being taught a different branch of knowledge, and altogether they flung wide open the doors of things humanity was not yet meant to know, knowledge that came too early, doors opened before their time. The children born of this union grew to enormous size, giants. According to some accounts, 300 cubits, more than 150 meters. They ravaged the earth. They devoured humans. They devoured each other. They devoured animals. They filled the world with blood, violence, and chaos. Order was shattered. The earth cried out. Quite literally, according to the account, the earth itself complained, wailed, could bear no more. And the flood came to wipe away this chaos, a punishment, a cleansing. The celestial beings were bound in chains until the end of days, in darkness, underground, and the waters rose. But one person was saved. According to this account, even his birth was not ordinary. He was born shining. His father was afraid. This is not a normal child, he had thought. And he was right. This child was the one who would survive the flood. Notice, the same skeleton is here too. Humanity crossed a boundary, the boundary of knowledge, the boundary of morality, the boundary of relations with the divine, and punishment came. The waters rose. Only one chosen person was saved. And here, a very interesting connection emerges. In Mesopotamia, the gods had gifted knowledge to humans. writing, agriculture, law, astronomy. These were gifts, like a parent giving the right knowledge to a child at the right time. In the Greek account, Prometheus stole knowledge without permission, without timing, without control. Stolen knowledge. And in the ancient Jewish tradition, celestial beings taught knowledge even though it was forbidden. Weapon making, cosmetics, astrology. Humanity was not yet ready. Knowledge had come too early. 3 different versions, but in all of them the same cycle. Knowledge arrives, knowledge becomes corrupted, destruction follows. And in all of them the same question: in whose hands should knowledge rest? Who will decide what should be learned and what should not? Perhaps the flood is not just a story about water. Perhaps it is a story about knowledge. The story of what happens when humanity receives knowledge too great to carry. Think of the atomic bomb. Knowledge was given to humanity, and what did humanity do with it? It brought the power of the sun down to earth and destroyed cities. Prometheus's fire became nuclear energy in the modern age, and the question remains the same: are we mature enough to carry this knowledge? But there is yet another dimension to this story, and this dimension may be the most human of all. In the Islamic tradition, the story of Noah is one of the most detailed accounts told. It is mentioned repeatedly across many chapters, and with each mention, a different facet is revealed. In this account, there are deeply striking scenes that do not appear in other versions. Noah warned people for years, according to some traditions, for centuries. Think about that, centuries. Every day, the same message. Night came, he told them. Day came, he told them. He told them openly, he told them in private. He spoke to individuals, he addressed crowds, he pleaded, patiently, persistently, tirelessly. To grasp the magnitude of this patience, stop and think for a moment. Imagine a person saying the same thing for 50 years, being mocked, being ostracized, being called mad, but getting up every morning and knocking on the same doors. According to some traditions, one generation passed, then a second, then a third. The grandchildren of those who refused to listen also refused to listen. Rejection had become hereditary, but the man would not give up. And the people did not listen. They mocked him. This man is mad, they said. They plugged their ears with their fingers, quite literally. They piled garments upon garments. We don't want to see, we don't want to hear. The man building a ship in the middle of the desert, the madman of the city. The construction of the ship itself is a scene unto itself. Imagine, in the middle of the desert, hundreds of kilometers from any sea, a man is building a massive ship, cutting timber, hammering nails, applying tar, under the sun, in the dust, and everyone who passes by stops and looks, laughs, shakes their head. Where will you sail this thing? On waves of sand? Children throw stones, elders curl their lips, and the man keeps working. Every day the ship rises a little higher. On dry land, the sight is beyond comprehension. A ship with no water around it, but its builder knows the water is coming. Some refuse to come for another reason entirely. You sit among the poor, they said. Look at the people around you. They are all wretched, all destitute. We will not board the same vessel as them. First, send them away, then we'll talk.
Pride, arrogance, class distinction. These lines, written thousands of years ago, don't they sound familiar in today's world? And in Noah's call, there is one more striking detail. As Noah told people to come, he described what would happen if they sought forgiveness. Rain would fall upon you. You would be given wealth. You would be given sons. You would be given gardens. You would be given rivers. A direct link was drawn between forgiveness and abundance. If you repent, rain will fall. This detail deserves attention because in the other flood stories, water is always destructive. But here, water can also be mercy. The same water. Rain is water. The flood is water. The difference lies in the person's attitude. And then came the most heartbreaking scene of all. When the waters began to rise, one of Noah's sons refused to board the ship. "I'll take shelter on a mountain," he said. "The water cannot reach me." He trusted his own strength. He trusted his own mind. Noah pleaded, "My son, board. Today there is no refuge except from the one who shows mercy." But the son turned toward the mountain, and a wave came, immense, insurmountable, irresistible. It rose between the two of them, and the son vanished before his eyes. This moment, this single moment, the most human point in all flood stories. Because the issue here is not merely the rising of the waters. The issue is who boards the ship and who does not, and the answer is shocking. Blood ties are not the determining factor. Being someone's son does not save you. Noah cried out in desperation, "But he is from my family," and the answer was absolute. "O Noah, he is not of your family. He is unrighteous conduct." This sentence, one of the most revolutionary lines in a tradition thousands of years old. Family, blood, lineage, none of these are an automatic guarantee of salvation. What matters is what you do. And this principle is repeated not once but 4 times in this tradition. A prophet's son did not believe, was not saved. A prophet's father worshipped idols, their paths diverged. A prophet's wife betrayed, punishment came. Another prophet's wife, the same. 4 different stories, 4 different examples, the same message. Proximity does not save you. And where did the ship come to rest? According to this account, on Mount Judy. In other traditions, it is called Ararat. In the Greek version, Parnassus. In the Indian tradition, a peak of the Himalayas. The name changes, but the mountain is always there. The waters cover everything, but one peak always remains above the water. Civilization is built in the valley. It grows, it strengthens, it expands, but when it collapses, the mountain remains. The mountain always remains. And in this tradition, the flood was not a one-time event. The first prophet warns, the people reject, destruction comes. Then a second prophet, another people, another warning, again rejection, again destruction, but this time by wind. Such a wind that it blew without ceasing for 7 nights and 8 days. People could not withstand the wind. They sought shelter at the base of palm trees, but even the trees were uprooted. Then another, by earthquake. One night before morning came, the ground turned upside down. Another, by a rain of stones. Baked clay rained from the sky. Every time the same pattern. Warning, rejection, destruction. Only the believers survive. And every time a different element. Water, wind, earthquake, stone. As if nature itself were a tool, and each time a different weapon were being used. The flood is the first link in this chain, but not the only one. And this is such an important distinction. The flood is not an exception, it is a pattern.
Let us take a step back. So far, we have seen flood stories from 5 different traditions, and in all of them, certain common motifs appear. First, a warning. Destruction does not come unannounced. Someone knows, someone warns, but the majority does not listen. Why is this pattern so universal? Perhaps because that is how it works in real life too. The warning signs are always there, but people do not see what they do not wish to see, do not hear what they do not wish to hear. Second, a vessel. Boat, chest, ship, whatever the name, a physical shelter to survive the waters. But is it only physical? The ship is also a symbol of a choice. The decision to build the ship means standing against the majority. It means continuing to work while everyone laughs. It means believing in the unseen. In every culture, the person who boards the ship is someone who has separated from society, but who turns out to be right. Third, a chosen one. Not everyone is saved. One person or one family is set apart from the rest, and this selection is never random. In Sumer, the one who obeyed the god. In Greece, the one who heeded his father's warning. In India, the one who protected the fish. In Islam, the one who called with patience for centuries. Each one represents a virtue. Fourth, a mountain. When the waters recede, the ship always comes to rest on a mountain. Ararat, Parnassus, Judy, the Himalayas. The mountain is the place the water cannot reach. Civilization is built in the valley, but in times of crisis, the mountain endures. The mountain is patience, resilience, humility. The valley produces wealth. The mountain preserves memory. Fifth, a new beginning. The flood is not an ending, but a reset. Humanity does not die, it is reborn, and the rebirth is never a copy of what came before. Each time a little different, a little more mature, a little wiser, at least for a while. There are three possibilities for why this story repeats. The first, it actually happened. We know that at the end of the Ice Age, approximately 12,000 years ago, sea levels rose by hundreds of meters. Coastal civilizations were submerged. We know that the Black Sea was once a freshwater lake that merged with the Mediterranean. When the natural dam broke, a massive deluge filled the Black Sea basin. By some estimates, the water rose 15 to 20 centimeters per day. It continued for centuries, but for those living on the shore, it meant a little more loss every day, a little more retreat every day. For generations, they watched the waters slowly swallowing their lands, and for generations, they told the story. This used to be dry land. Mesopotamia itself has a geography uniquely suited to this. The Tigris and Euphrates flooded irregularly, sometimes mildly, sometimes devastatingly. For people living on low plains, a major flood could mean the difference between life and death. And the greatest of these floods, thousands of years ago, may have truly devastated the region. Archaeologists found a thick layer of flood sediment beneath the city of Ur, a clean, sterile layer covering everything. Below it, one civilization, above it, another. In between, the flood. The second, they borrowed from one another. The first story was told somewhere and spread through trade routes, migrations, and cultural contact. This is very possible, especially since we know of trade networks spanning thousands of years between Mesopotamia, the Levant, Egypt, and the Aegean. Stories may have traveled with merchants, but to India, to China, to the indigenous peoples of South America, such distant spread is hard to explain. The third, the human mind works this way. An order, a corruption, a destruction, a new beginning. This cycle is buried deep within human psychology. Every child builds structures and knocks them down. Every agricultural community experiences planting, growth, harvest, and the resting of the soil. Every human sleeps and wakes. Perhaps the flood story is this universal rhythm carried to its grandest scale. Perhaps all three are true at the same time. Perhaps a real catastrophe occurred. That catastrophe became a story, the story spread, and everywhere it spread, it found resonance, because the human mind was already prepared for this pattern. So what happened after the flood? This part may be the least discussed, but the most important. In the ancient Greek tradition, a thinker pondered what happened in the aftermath of floods, and his conclusion is chillingly logical. After a great catastrophe, he said, only mountain shepherds survive. Everyone living in the valleys, the cities, the coasts is wiped out, but those in the mountains, those farthest from civilization, survive. And what happens? Everything resets. Writing is lost. There is no one left to read what was written. Metalworking is lost. The blacksmiths were in the cities. Agricultural knowledge is lost. The farmers were in the valleys. Arts, law, commerce, all erased. For thousands of years, people must rediscover all of these things from scratch. Think about what this means. A community accumulates knowledge over generations, from astronomy to agriculture, from metallurgy to medicine. Each generation builds upon the previous one. Then a catastrophe comes and wipes everything out. The next generations start from zero. They must relearn the stars, They must relearn how to control fire. They must reinvent the calendar. And this process takes thousands of years. Perhaps this is why ancient civilizations astonish us so much. We look at the engineering precision of the Egyptian pyramids and ask, how did they do this? Perhaps the answer is, perhaps they did not learn it only once. Perhaps they learned it before, lost it, and learned it again. Perhaps civilization is not linear, but spiral. Thousands of cities were built and destroyed, said this thinker. Great ones shrank, small ones grew. This is a cycle. Civilization is born, grows, decays, collapses. Then it is born again. And the same idea reappeared centuries later in a very different geography. In North Africa in the 14th century, a great thinker observed the cyclical structure of civilizations and built a theory. Every state passes through 5 phases: victory, dominion, prosperity, contentment, waste, and then collapse. Apply these 5 phases to your own era for a moment. The first generation founds a state, courageous, determined, bound by solidarity. The second generation consolidates the victory. The third generation savors the prosperity. The fourth generation takes the system their forebears built as a given, believing it was won for free. They spend as though it was never earned. And the fifth generation wastes, corrupts, and loses everything. And a new power from the mountains, from the desert, from the margins arrives, and the cycle begins anew. This thinker spoke of civilizations wiped away by floods. He most likely had never read the Greek thinker, but he reached the same conclusion. 1,700 years separate them. One was doing philosophy in Athens, the other writing history in North Africa, but both saw the same pattern. Civilizations are born, grow, decay, and die, and from every death a new birth comes. Let us continue with the story of a lost island. According to an ancient account, there was an enormous island in the west, beyond the straits. This island was larger even than the lands of present-day North Africa and Western Asia combined. The people who lived on this island were descendants from a semi-divine lineage. In the beginning, that divine nature was dominant. They were just, wise, balanced, humble. They lived in houses of gold and silver, but did not worship wealth. Their harbors were full of ships, their markets bustled, their engineering was awe-inspiring. They had built concentric ring-shaped canals, bridges, and walls. They had the power to rule the world, but they did not use it because their virtue was greater than their power. Then, slowly, generation by generation, the transformation began. The divine nature was diluted. Human nature began to prevail. Ambition grew. The concept of enough was forgotten. They wanted more power, more land, more control. They sent armies. They attacked this side of the Mediterranean, Europe, and Africa. They conquered, they forced, they imposed. Morality collapsed. But the most striking part is this. To an outside observer, they still appeared magnificent. Their palaces gleamed. Their armies were strong. Their wealth was beyond comprehension. But they had already rotted. The power visible from the outside did not conceal the emptiness within. The king of the gods gathered all the gods. He decided to impose punishment, and the account cuts off right there. The text, written thousands of years ago, breaks like a knife at exactly the scene of punishment. But we don't need to know. The pattern is already clear. In one day and one night, earthquakes and waters came, and the island sank to the bottom of the sea. One day and one night. That is how long the destruction took. A civilization built, enriched, and expanded over generations, erased in 24 hours. The tempo itself is a message. Destruction is always faster than construction. An Egyptian priest speaking on this matter reportedly said, "You always remain children because your memory is short, but our records are old and these catastrophes have happened before." Let us dwell on this sentence. You remain children because your memory is short. One generation experiences a catastrophe,
The next generation forgets, the third generation repeats the same mistakes, and the priest says, "We kept records, we did not allow forgetting, we preserved memory."
These catastrophes have happened before. Not once. Multiple floods, multiple destructions, multiple new beginnings. The same structure, again. Pure beginning, corruption, destruction, reset. Why can humanity not escape this pattern? Perhaps we're asking the wrong question. Perhaps the issue is not, are these stories true? Perhaps the issue is, why did humanity need these stories so badly? The flood story may be humanity's oldest survival mechanism. Everything can end, but it doesn't have to. Think for a moment about humanity's hardest moments: plague outbreaks, world wars, earthquakes, migrations. In those moments, what did people do? They told stories. They told their children, this has happened before and it passed. And the power of that statement gave something that no weapon, no wall, no army could give: the courage to carry on. That is what the flood story is. Yes, everything was destroyed, but someone survived and started over. This sentence is one of humanity's oldest medicines. Notice, in none of the flood stories is humanity completely annihilated. Always, without fail, one person survives, in a boat, on a mountain, but survives. And that survivor carries something with them. In Mesopotamia, craftsmen were taken aboard the ship because the knowledge to rebuild the world would be needed. In the Islamic tradition, pairs of every living thing boarded. The diversity of life was preserved. In the Indian tradition, Manu took the seed of every plant. Destruction wipes everything away, but someone always saves the seeds. Someone always carries the memory. Someone always keeps the fire burning. Humanity told of destruction, but the more it told of destruction, the more it also told of rebirth. Fear and hope in flood stories are never separated. And this cycle, destruction and renewal, is not found only in flood stories. It has seeped into every corner of humanity. In ancient Egypt, the sun died every night. It descended below the horizon in the west. It sank into the dark waters of the underworld. There, throughout the night, it battled the forces of chaos, giant serpents, creatures of darkness, especially a colossal chaos serpent that tried to swallow the sun every night. The battle raged for hours. Sometimes the sun weakened, sometimes it nearly lost, and every morning it was reborn from the east, golden, luminous, undefeated. Every night a small flood, every morning a small new beginning. And the Egyptians knew this victory was not guaranteed. Every night was a real battle. Tomorrow's arrival was not certain. Every dawn was a grace. This is why the Egyptians did not regard night merely as a time for sleep. Night was the hour when order battled chaos, and the outcome of this battle was so important that rituals were held in the temples to help the sun. Walls were covered with paintings, images of the sun defeating the serpent, as if humanity with its own hands could support the cycle of the universe. In the ancient Persian tradition, the universe is a battlefield. Good and evil have been at war since the beginning, but this war does not last forever. According to some ancient beliefs, at the end of time, good will prevail. Rivers of molten metal will cover the earth. For the righteous, it will feel like warm milk. For the wicked, it will feel like fire. Everything will be purified. Even the most evil soul will be cleansed. Darkness will be erased forever. This too is a kind of flood, not with water, but with light. And notice, even here the same pattern holds: a purification, a cleansing, and afterward a pure new beginning.
And in the ancient Phoenician tradition, there is a magnificent symbol, the bird that burns in its own fire and is reborn from its ashes. This bird lives 500 years, in some accounts 1,000, even 14,000. When it reaches the end of its life, it builds a nest of fragrant plants and spices, and it gives itself to the flame. It burns to ashes, and from those ashes a new bird is born, young, brilliant, radiant. Death and resurrection in a single body, annihilation and re-existence in a single motion. This symbol was so powerful that over the centuries it spread to dozens of different cultures, from Rome to China.
An ancient mathematician even gave this phenomenon a name, the Great Year, an immense span of time in which the universe would complete its entire cycle and return to the beginning. In the Indian tradition, billions of years. In other traditions, hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of years. The duration differed, but the idea was the same. Everything turns. Everything starts over. The flood is the water version of this cycle. It can also happen with fire, with ice, with famine, with war. But every time, the same pattern. Order, corruption, destruction, purification, new order. Tonight, we took a long journey together. We began in the humid lands of Mesopotamia. Among clay tablets, we read a story written 4,000 years ago. We listened to the old man encountered by a king who sought immortality at the end of the world. We saw a serpent steal a plant, and we saw that immortality passes not through the body, but through the story. We crossed to the rocky mountains of Greece. We saw Prometheus's theft of fire, the justice and shame given to humanity, Pandora's box, the loss of the Golden Age. We watched Deucalion's chest, that chest drifting on the water for 9 days and 9 nights, and on Parnassus we saw humanity reborn from stone. We reached the rivers of the Indian subcontinent. We watched a tiny fish that fit in the palm of a hand transform into an immense force that saved the universe. We heard the inhalation and exhalation of cosmic cycles spanning billions of years. We learned that destruction is not a catastrophe, but the nature of the universe. We peered into the mysterious texts of ancient Jewish traditions. We saw 200 celestial beings swear an oath and descend to earth, the transfer of forbidden knowledge, the birth of giants. We heard the earth itself cry out, and we watched the waters that came to wash away the chaos. We listened to the most striking story of the Islamic tradition. We saw a prophet who warned tirelessly for centuries. We imagined a ship rising in the middle of the desert, and we felt the anguish of a father who lost his own son between the waves. We heard that blood ties are not salvation, that what matters is what you do. We listened to the story of a sunken island, that magnificent, wealthy, powerful island that was destroyed in a single day and night. We passed through Egypt's sun that dies every night and is reborn every morning. We passed through Persia's cosmic war and rivers of molten metal. We passed through India's universe that breathes for billions of years. We saw the bird that burns in its own fire and is reborn. And everywhere, we found the same thing. The waters rose, one man survived, and humanity started over. Why? Perhaps because it really happened. Perhaps because there is a fear buried at the very deepest part of being human. Perhaps because every generation tells itself the same thing. If everything comes to an end, and it might, let us have a boat. This story is the one humanity has been telling the longest, and perhaps the one it will never stop telling. Because in a sense, the flood never ended. Every generation lives its own flood. Every collapse is a reset. Every crisis is a new beginning. Every war, every plague, every earthquake, every migration, they are all small floods. And every time the same pattern.
Someone builds a boat, builds a home, raises a child, tells a story, saves a seed, writes a book, offers a prayer. Perhaps this is why the flood story is immortal, because we are still inside the flood. We are still building boats. We are still saving seeds. We are still telling stories, just as we are tonight. And every time, humanity starts over.
Did you notice something in this story? We saw why the waters rose. We saw why the gods punished. But what did people see when they looked at the sky? Why did they believe their fates were written in the stars? That is a story at least as old and at least as astonishing. But that is a matter for another night. Humanity asked that question too. Some civilizations drew star maps. Some considered the sky the throne of the gods. Some believed that fate was written in the stars. And some, very few, looked at the stars and said, "I don't know." That too was an answer. For now, listen to the sound of the waters. It is a very old sound, perhaps the sound of the first story humanity ever told, a sound filtering through 4,000-year-old clay tablets, blowing from the peak of Mount Parnassus, echoing at the foot of the Himalayas, hidden in the creak of a ship that came to rest on Mount Judy. Good night.